My neighbor kept destroying my garden and lying about it. So I caught him on video and got him evicted, with a criminal record. From the moment he moved in, I had a bad feeling about him. I don't know what it was. Maybe the way he parked his truck halfway across my lawn that first night. Or how he lit up a cigarette while talking to the property manager, like he owned the place. But something in my gut told me this guy, Derek, was going to be a problem. Still, I tried to give him a chance. I've always believed in neighborly kindness. My name's Claire, I'm 37, single, and I live in a cozy 2-story rental duplex just outside of Charlotte. I'd worked hard to make my little slice of life feel like a home. And most of all, I loved my garden. My garden was, well, not just dirt and flowers, it was my therapy. Rows of lavender, hydrangeas, cherry tomatoes, and sunflowers lined the side yard. I'd even set up a small koi pond, dug with my own hands, complete with solar lights and a hand-painted gnome named Winston. Every Saturday morning, I'd sip coffee on the porch and watch the butterflies dance over the blossoms. It was the one thing in my life that always gave back. So when Derek's dog, a massive slobbery mutt named Tank, came barreling through my garden the first week he moved in, trampling a full bed of herbs, I felt my stomach drop. I shouted from my porch. Derek was standing in his driveway talking on the phone. He didn't even flinch. Didn't look. Didn't care. I walked over trying to stay calm. "Excuse me, your dog just ran through my garden." He glanced at me with a smirk. "He's just exploring. It's grass. He's a dog." I pointed. "It's not just grass. That's my planted garden. And the sign there clearly says, 'Please keep pets off the greenery.'" He shrugged. "Maybe you shouldn't plant stuff in shared spaces then." And that was the first red flag. But not the worst. Not even close. Over the next few weeks, it became a pattern. Tank would tear through the flowers. Derek would shrug it off. One morning, I came out to find my tomato plants dug up entirely. Roots exposed, cages snapped. Another time, someone had snapped the head off Winston the gnome and tossed it into the pond. I bought a motion sensor sprinkler. It got torn out within days. I installed a tiny wooden fence. It was mysteriously broken during a storm. Derek swore we'd had, though the weather had been clear all week. I filed 2 noise complaints. Nothing happened. The landlord, Mr. Koenig, was polite but dismissive. "It's hard to prove," he said. "He says the dog's always leashed." Without evidence. I realized then that if I wanted this to stop, I'd have to get that evidence myself. So I bought a camera. Actually, I bought 3. Tiny Wi-Fi connected motion capture cameras that blended perfectly into the garden decor. One hidden in a birdhouse, one disguised in a stone, and one embedded in a faux solar light. They were synced to my phone, streaming live whenever motion was detected. And oh, I didn't know what I expected, but I did not expect what I saw. Because it wasn't just the dog. It was Derek. Late one night, I got a notification. I opened the live feed groggily, half expecting a raccoon. But no, it was Derek, kicking my planter boxes. He was drunk, slurring, laughing to himself. "Let's see how you like this, garden butch," he muttered, before ripping up a trellis and tossing it across the yard. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. My hands were shaking as I hit record on the app. Then, 2 nights later, he came back, this time with a beer in hand and a lighter. He lit one of my solar lights on fire. Plastic melted, smoke drifted into the feed. He stomped on it and said, "Oops, must have short-circuited." I had everything on video, and that's when I knew. This wasn't just a bad neighbor. This was personal. But what I found next changed everything. Because when I followed the footage trail back far enough, I discovered something buried deep in the garden soil. Something that didn't belong. Something that would turn this petty neighbor feud into a criminal investigation. I didn't sleep that night. The video of Derek lighting my solar lamp on fire kept playing on a loop in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flames flicker in the dark. Heard his drunk voice muttering my name like it was some kind of punchline. But it was what I found the next morning that pushed me over the edge. I was digging up the charred remains of my light when I saw it. Something shiny and metallic buried beneath the mulch. At first, I thought it was just trash. But when I knelt down and brushed the dirt away, my fingers closed around a zip-top bag. Inside, a small black pouch with pills. Not one or two. Dozens, unmarked. My breath caught in my throat. I looked around. Nobody was outside. The street was quiet. I tucked the pouch into my jacket and went inside, heart pounding. What the hell had I just found? I knew I couldn't just accuse him, not without proof. So I did the smart thing. I put on gloves, took photos, sealed the bag inside a second one, and then I opened the footage from the night before. I scrolled past the garden vandalism, scanning every second, until I saw him. Derek. Around 2:12 a.m., he staggered across the yard holding something. He knelt near my flower bed, looked around, and then buried it. The pouch. It was clear as day. He wasn't just trashing my garden, he was using it as a stash spot. And suddenly everything made sense. Why he was so defensive. Why he got aggressive every time I brought up boundaries. Why Tank was allowed to run wild, probably as a distraction. And why every time I tried to fix things, they ended up mysteriously worse. He wasn't just a bad neighbor, he was hiding something. That morning, I called the non-emergency police line. I didn't make wild accusations. I simply told the officer that I'd found suspicious substances buried on my property, with video evidence. I offered to bring it all in. An hour later, I was sitting in a small, quiet room at the local precinct with Officer Jordan, a plainclothes guy who looked like he'd seen every kind of crazy this town had to offer. He watched the footage in silence. When it ended, he looked at me and said, "You weren't supposed to find this." I blinked. "What does that mean?" He leaned back. "We've had our eye on your neighbor. Complaints, noise, suspected dealing, but nothing stuck. This?" He held up the bag. "This might finally be enough for a search warrant." My hands were sweating. "So what happens now?" He smiled. "Now, we watch." For the next 4 days, I played the role of the quiet, obedient neighbor. I watered my garden like nothing was wrong. Waved to Derek with the fakest smile I could muster. Let Tank sniff around like usual. But behind the scenes, my footage kept piling up. Derek meeting people at the side gate in the middle of the night, exchanging handshakes, quick glances, small bags passed back and forth. Every time I caught something, I forwarded the clip to Officer Jordan. He was building a case. And on the 5th day, a Tuesday, it happened. They raided his place. 6 plainclothes officers, 2 marked cars, and a K-9 unit swarmed the property at 6:43 a.m. I was in my kitchen, coffee in hand, when I saw the flashing lights. Tank was barking like mad. Derek was in cuffs within minutes, screaming that it was all a mistake, that he didn't know what they were talking about. But the look on his face when he saw me, standing calmly on the porch, pure hatred. And I smiled. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because what the police found inside Derek's unit didn't just confirm the drug dealing theory. It revealed something darker. Fraudulent IDs, stolen mail, packages addressed to different names. He was running a full-on identity theft operation out of the duplex. Credit card skimmers, laptops loaded with phishing software, even a list of targets. And guess who was on the list? Me. Turns out while I was trying to preserve my garden, he was planning to ruin my entire life. The day Derek was arrested felt like the sun came out after a year of storm clouds. But it wasn't over. Because even though he was hauled off in cuffs, the fallout had just begun. And some part of me, the part that had watched him destroy my garden over and over, knew he wasn't done trying to hurt me. That feeling was confirmed less than 48 hours later when I got a letter slipped under my door. A lawsuit. Derek was accusing me of unlawful surveillance and privacy invasion. The audacity. I sat on my couch holding the paper, stunned. I could still hear the sound of Tank's paws smashing into my planter boxes like it was yesterday. And now this man had the nerve to play the victim? I called Officer Jordan. His voice was calm but firm. "Don't worry. You were protecting your property. Your footage wasn't through any windows. It's not only legal, it's admissible." But that wasn't enough for me. Because Derek had tried to gaslight me, intimidate me, vandalize my sanctuary, and turn my life upside down, all while operating a criminal enterprise from 6 feet away. And now he wanted to make me the villain? No. He wasn't going to walk away from this with just a slap on the wrist. So I started digging, literally and figuratively. With Officer Jordan's help, I gave statements to the detectives working his case. I handed over every recording, every still image, every time-stamped video of his backyard drug deals. I even made a backup drive in case anything mysteriously disappeared. Then, I did some research. Turns out when you use rented property to commit crimes, your lease becomes invalid in most states. I contacted the property manager, Mr. Koenig, again. But this time, I wasn't just a complaining tenant. I was the woman who had exposed a criminal ring using his property. And suddenly, Mr. Koenig had a whole new attitude. Within a week, Derek's lease was terminated. Eviction notice posted. But the best part? Because Derek was being formally charged, the local DA requested an emergency protective order to keep him from contacting me. That lawsuit he tried to file? Dismissed with prejudice? You should have seen my face when I got the notice in the mail. I laughed so hard I spilled wine on my couch. And then, like karma had been waiting patiently, the real kicker came in. I was approached by a local news station. They had caught wind of the arrest, and when they heard a resident had caught it all on camera, they reached out to me. I agreed to do an interview, anonymously at first. They blurred my face and used a voice filter, but I knew. Derek would know it was me. The story aired on a Thursday evening. Title? Local Woman's Garden, Cam uncovers identity theft ring. Exposes neighbor's criminal past. Yeah, criminal past, because it turned out this wasn't Derek's first run. He'd done time in another state for fraud, under a different name. That was the part that made my skin crawl. The name he gave our landlord, the one on his packages, even on the mailbox, it was fake. He'd created an entirely new identity and slipped into our neighborhood like a shadow. But thanks to my garden and a stubborn little gnome named Winston, that shadow was dragged into the light. The final update came 3 months later. I was sitting in my kitchen when I got the email from the county clerk's office. Derek had pled guilty. Identity theft, possession of narcotics with intent to distribute, probation violations, 2 years, no parole. He was going away. And the cherry on top? Because he'd committed fraud while out on parole, his previous sentence was reactivated. That added another 3 years. 5 years total. I stood on my porch that evening, wine in hand, watching the garden sway in the breeze. The lavender had come back stronger. My tomatoes were thriving, and I'd bought a new gnome. This one held a tiny sign that said, "Smile, you're on camera." Sometimes neighbors can be annoying. Sometimes they're careless. But sometimes they're predators in hoodies and stolen names. And when that happens, you don't scream. You don't start a war. You get smart. You get quiet. And you dig. Because the deeper you dig, the more roots you find. And sometimes, just sometimes, you find something dark enough to bury them. For good.